Hello, everybody. Welcome to Yes Tomorrow, or welcome back. Thanks for being here tonight. We're really excited to have Ruth here as part of our speaker series this fall. This is talk 4 out of 5 of the series. So we have one more next week. That will be with Sandra from the Plainfield Village Expansion Project. And it should be really, really interesting about alternative models for homeownership. And I'll just do my quick little housekeeping notes. Restrooms are in the lobby, straight this way towards the front door. We have some cookies in the back. We'd love it if you would hang out afterwards and mingle and have some refreshments. Our talks are scheduled until you have the time until 8, so whatever time you use for your talk, the rest of it we can hang out and ask questions and all that good stuff. We are a nonprofit. We welcome donations to sustain our work and our programming and things like the speaker series. So love it if you consider donating to support our work. And I think that's it. Oh, lastly, we have a standby for locals program. If you're a resident of Washington County, you can sign up for that list. And then when we have spaces available on sort of a shorter timeline left in class, we offer those spaces at 50% off to people on that list. So that's a great resource if you're not already on it and you are a resident of Washington County. And with that, really happy to introduce Ruth. Ruth comes to us from Co-Adaptive, which is a firm down in Brooklyn. You will hear much more about it. We have several points of connection and crossover between us, including instructors and employees and things like that. So I always like when we get a little bit more of an urban perspective on everything, because we tend to be very focused in on our little valley. So we're going to hear about what's going on in New York City, which will be really fun. So take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you all for coming out on this rainy night. Since it's such a small group, I was wondering if I could first ask you all to just briefly tell me your name and maybe your relationship to high performance building, passive house, sort of your level of knowledge potentially. Maybe start over there.
Alex, it's kind of.
Cool.
I'm Ken, also not particularly knowledgeable.
Okay. In the back?
Oh, I'm Chris. Pretty good understanding of building science in general.
Okay.
I don't have, I just hear about it a lot here, but I don't have a full understanding.
My name's Trey. I really don't know much of them.
Okay.
My name is Janet. I know nothing.
Okay. Bobby, I know what you know.
I'm Tate. One of my coworkers is certified and sits next to me, so we kind of talk about it, but I'd like to learn more.
Okay.
Hey, I've been in the high performance building world for the last 25 years. But not very well or being an architect, so I'm associated, but I know a lot about that.
I'm Sophia, and I don't know much, but I'm very curious.
Okay. It helps me understand where everyone's at. Okay, I don't want you. So Co-Adaptive is a practice based out of Brooklyn, and we started as a architecture practice, Bobby and I, almost 15 years ago. We met at grad school, and the talk I'm going to give today is sort of about the basis of our work, which is sort of rooted in high performance and passive house, in healthy materials and alternative assemblies, and then in reuse and deconstruction. We, like I said, started in 2011. It was just the two of us for many years. We were in a tiny little very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter studio in Bushwick when we started. And we really founded the practice on sort of two main mission points or principles. One was that we wanted to work to better our relationship with our environment, with our planet. And two was that based on experiences that we had in other architecture practices, it was very important to us that we value time and we value the labor that goes into conceiving of buildings. And both of these have sort of fundamentally stayed with us as our practice adapted and changed over time. This is one of our first ever projects that we completed, and it was for a very savvy client who essentially pushed us with a very small budget to be inventive with what was already there. It was a sort of small apartment renovation in an existing landmarked building in New York City. And we went to Build It Green at the time, which was sort of a reuse center in New York City. We found bowling alley floor, and we worked a lot with what the apartment already had to offer. And this principle has sort of stayed with Co-Adaptive as we went on. And so it's still sort of this is our early days. Bobby and I renovated our townhouse to Passive House principles in 2017 before our daughter was born. And so that was our first experience renovating an old building that was built in 1889 into a Passive House. So Passive House, for anyone who doesn't know, essentially really, really thoroughly insulates a building, has very high performing triple paned windows, and air seals the building, sort of creating almost like a balloon that's airtight. And then it has filtered fresh air in the form of a energy recovery ventilator. And of course, this is tricky to do in an old building. But this house is now fully electrified. We have solar on the roof, and we can essentially power 2 families, an electric car, and we still create more electricity in a year than we need. So to us, it's sort of building of the future. They say it's the lowest cost of maintenance, it's the lowest cost of ownership, and there's love and labor that goes into it. The house that we renovated had a lot of old millwork and details that we essentially carefully saved and then reinstated. Fast forward to 2021, we founded Co-Adaptive Building. And the reason was really that we had worked with multiple general contractors, sort of teaching their crews over and over again how to carefully seal up a building, how to carefully renovate it to Passive House. And we figured that if we have our own team and we can sort of get more efficient and better at it over time. And not only that, it was really important to us that we innovate on the reuse aspect, since we're working with only existing buildings. It is important to us what we take out in order to retrofit it to sort of this high performance level, what we put back in. And we found as architects, we would spend a lot of time researching that, putting that in our drawing set, and then handing it over to a general contractor and being disappointed when, they didn't order something in time and very last minute it got value engineered out, or they convinced the client that going with foam was the better way to go because it was cheaper. And so we started our build time to increase our impact over the entire process, to make sure that the things that we were conceiving of made its way through. And I think that is really the power of design build. So, like I mentioned, we work with existing buildings. New York is interesting in the sense that it has an enormous stock of row houses that were built around the turn of the century. Between 1860 is the oldest one we've worked on to date, through the 1950s. And they're sort of all reaching that point in their life when they need an upgrade. And when you upgrade an old building like that, it's really important to us that we look at how we're taking things out and what happens to them, and that we're sort of careful and thoughtful about minimizing or entirely eliminating landfill waste. So in renovating these old buildings, we've sort of realized that there is a gradient between what we're calling a surgical renovation to an entire sort of, I hate the word gut renovation because it sort of suggests that everything that you find in there is gutted and stripped out and no longer has a use. So we've been trying to find language that describes this idea of the gut without that connotation, and we landed on rebuild. So here on the side, I have a little gradient. I'm going to introduce you to a couple of projects that we've completed that sort of span the gradient from very surgical to entirely rebuilt. And I will say that it's the building that defines it, it's the client that defines it, and of course, it's the budget that defines it. This particular building is a landmark building from 1860 something, in a neighborhood in Brooklyn, a two-family. And it had been very well maintained through its life. One of the first things we do when we work with these existing buildings is we take a careful initial scan of the existing conditions, and we build a Revit model of the exact condition that it's in. And this building had beautiful plasterwork and beautiful old details, and the owners came to us with the intent of creating a passive house. And when they realized what that would mean in terms of the disruption, you have to take things out in order to do that membrane work, in order to seal it up. They got cold feet. and the cost of that intricate plasterwork to return that is a lot. And so this project is an example of really carefully updating systems, maintaining. It was very compartmentalized. So we did a lot of structural work to open rooms to one another, to reconnect spaces. We installed high performance windows and skylights and air sealed those openings. We insulated the roof and to the cellar, but we didn't tear anything out. The old growth pine wood flooring was sanded and stayed. And so it's fully electrified. It's sort of brought up to today's standard. It performs better than it did, but it's not a full passive house. The next one is similar, but different. It slides down the scale towards intensity. It's similar in that it also, this is it, slightly bigger. It was also in beautiful shape. It had, on the inside, it had a lot of plasterwork that remained. But the owners really wanted that insulation. And the interesting thing about row houses is they're connected on two sides. So you have your main heat loss at the front facade and at the rear facade, at the roof, at the cellar, but you don't have that much heat loss to your neighbors because they're heated. And so on this one, we essentially did the full passive house at sort of the three sides, the roof, the front and rear facade. We insulated from the interior a good 12 inches. We air sealed. You can see how careful that work is. We're sort of slicing away plaster in order to fur out these walls. And sort of carefully removing trim work to update electrical, to insert the ERVs. And it's extremely labor-intensive work. And I think it sort of underlines this constant thread in our work that's contending with the balance between operational carbon, which is the energy that we save by not heating and cooling our buildings. Passive houses take 80 to 90% less energy to heat and cool. But there's a lot of embodied energy in the materials that you're removing in order to achieve that higher level of operational energy. And so I think a project like this really contends with what is the minimum we can do to make this tight? And what is that sort of navigation between operational and embodied carbon? And it gets messy. You can see how careful sort of we're taking away millwork or trim work that we will be returning. Ceilings are half opened and plasterwork sort of stays intact. Here's us sort of cataloging all of the things that will go back in. Another thing sort of to touch on is that we made a foam-free pledge back in 2019. And so we don't insulate our passive houses with foam. And that means we're always sort of experimenting with forms of natural insulation. In the left here, you can see this is one of the first shipments, or the first shipment that went to New York City from Timber HP. Their timber fill blow-in insulation. Our carpenters got a lesson on how to blow that, and we got a trailer load of the stuff and used it on 3 houses. And then behind them is hempcrete, which we used on our interior walls. On the right is wool. We've insulated one of our houses with wool so far, which is wonderful but expensive. And that was another thing that being design build really gave us. Making that pledge to be foam free and having the ability to have that impact all the way through, because it's important. So this is the house today, a fully new facade, high performance openings, and an insulated rear and front wall. Us putting all of those details back. That thickened sill that you get. It's already been decorated for the kid that will grow up in it. This is our tiny Queens passive house. I think it sits right squarely in the middle between surgical and rebuild. Whereas on the previous one I just showed, we insulated the front and rear wall really well. On this building, we essentially, it's from 1940, so it was already in relatively good shape. Our client loved the layout, but the systems were old, the boiler was defunct. And so essentially we carved a moat around this entire perimeter, which is expressed in the flooring. All the framing remained intact, but that moat was sliced so that we could access all of the framing joists and sort of carefully tape around them. So it's sort of one step up from the one I previously showed where we're really just touching the front and rear facade. On this one, we're wrapping the whole thing. It is a passive house, but it still is very surgical in nature. You can see things stayed, but the entire perimeter was affected. The building had openings in the facade for AC, through wall AC units. We used those for local ERVs. We retained all of the doors and all of the beautiful Art Deco hardware, but updated it, modernized it, had new access to the roof. Here's a nice little before and after. And again, sort of maintained and stitched and repaired, but left what we could intact. A note here is that one of the things that we found with Passive House is the biggest bang for your buck is exterior shading. Passive houses were conceived to retain heat. And so they were really developed for wintertime. Vermont is a perfect example. They are sort of wrapped in this amazing blanket and no heat travels in and out. And that's really, really great in the winter. But if you don't let the sun heat the building up in the summertime, then it's also amazing at retaining cool, and you can sort of minimize your AC use if you just are really careful about that heat penetration. So in our house, we go to work, we put all of our shades down, the house is dark, and we come home and it's cool, and we use a lot less energy on our AC. They're completely operable. And so on this one, because it's this sort of funky, Queensy 1940s, less precious than the brownstone, we exposed them. But on our house, when they're open, they entirely tuck behind the brownstone layer and you don't even know that they're there. And Landmarks has even given us the okay in a landmark district to do that. So yeah, highly recommended on all buildings. Climate is just getting hotter. I'm going to move through this one pretty quickly. It's, again, a step closer towards sort of the rebuild. It was essentially the only thing that remained in this building was the staircase and some of the flooring. But otherwise, it was pretty hollowed out. It had a couple of nice details that we kept and or recreated. But when we opened this one up, we realized that it was one of the worst masonry conditions we had ever seen. It had been, for a lot of its life, sort of the end row house next to an empty lot. Which when a row house is connected from both sides, it lasts longer. This one had a lot of deterioration at one point. You can sort of see it on the left. The CMU had been just sort of built willy-nilly. The front facade was no longer connected to the party walls, and there was a lot of masonry work that we did to reinforce that old building. But we also found some really cool things hidden in the walls, like these old doors that someone had just sort of decided were not, just boxed them in. Yeah, you can sort of see condition of masonry. Lily on the right, blowing insulation. And we saved a lot of the details as well to return back into the building. There's the stair that we had sort of rigged up all through construction, made sturdy again, but kept in place. This one is almost complete, no finished photos yet. And lastly, Monroe, M512A. We give all of our projects codes. This building was probably one of the worst conditions we had ever encountered. Speaking of a building also driving the scope, most of our clients sort of live in these houses while we're designing and then move out just before construction commences. So they're in livable condition. This one was not. The roof was failing. There was this sort of gross carpeting from the 70s. And so essentially everything came out. But again, we saved the parts of the building that were beautiful. And we really sealed it holistically, reinforced it structurally. And this is a big pile of framing lumber that came out of this particular project sitting in our office. We are definitely hoarders of old wood, and you know, this framing lumber comes from trees that existed 300 some years ago, and often the quality is amazing. And frequently we now make things out of this in our shop and we return it to the project themselves. On the right is an example of a vanity. All of the vanities in this building were made out of the framing lumber that came out. An example of us retrofitting shutters to go back into the enlarged sort of passive house openings. And on the right, pre-painting all of that old millwork going back in. Our carpenters working on the building in the yard on all of that trim. Yeah, so this building really had it all in the sense that it is a certified passive house, but we were able to return a lot of its original details and sort of give it a new life. And I think for us, you know, we work with existing buildings, which means that the situations and the things that we encounter are always different, but we've learned that there are processes and systems and details that we can set up that allow us to make retrofits of row house to high efficiency standards more streamlined, which in the end, our goal is to make this something that isn't just accessible to the 1%, the sort of fancy neighborhoods of Brooklyn, but we do truly believe that this is the way that we should be retrofitting to last for the next 100 some years. And so our effort is to sort of systematize that, to become better at it, to have an array of details that we can use over and over again. And to that end, one of the other things that we've been doing with a lot of the framing lumber that we take out and ensure doesn't go to waste is we've been developing a disassemblable modular wall system. The intent is that it air seals and insulates to passive house standards, but that it is essentially modular. This is a little story of joist to assembled block, as we call it. Here are the component pieces. So it's really very similar to the concept of a passive house window, that when you essentially lock this system into place, when you lock the panels into the frame, they're gasketed and sealed really airtightly without the need of tapes and membranes, which they're labor intensive. They're the most labor intensive part of retrofitting an existing building. And so we're developing the system with the idea that it can be built off site, that two people can assemble it, and that it's a little bit more plug and play so that you can retrofit these buildings, maybe a little bit more sequentially, maybe one floor at a time, or just a room in the house, or a little cube in a loft that is tightly air sealed and insulated. So we're excited about it, and it's in development, but it's sort of our, pet project. Just won our first grant for it. Here is our org chart that just sort of shows the connectivity between architecture, building, and now co-adaptive disassembly, which is really focused on taking old buildings apart with the idea that becomes more common practice, that we can bring materials back into the stream of use, that we can become more circular in our building practices. And New York City is so full of materials, and buildings are being taken apart all day, every day. And a lot of that is going into landfill, and it shouldn't. I think many of the things we've learned are that everybody brings different strengths to the table, and it's about communication and transparency and clarity. And I love being design build for all of the opportunities that it offers, but it takes a whole team. It takes people with different brains and different skills to make it happen. And that is that. Yes.
Maybe this is related to the modular wall system. I'm wondering if you've ever worked on a building that maybe was owned by a couple different people, or have you ever had like competing interests within a retrofit? And how, like, with one envelope, how do you competing interests?
I think that is where our desire for the block came from too. I think our closest experience is Quincy, which is the purple one. It's tenants in common. So two couples bought a 4-story brownstone and renovated it. And they call themselves a commune, and I'm really impressed. I think one of the couples came with this idea that we wanted to be high performance, and they managed to convince their commune cohort to make it happen. But obviously that's not always the case. We get a lot of calls from people who live in co-op buildings and owning a share, an apartment, who want to retrofit just their portion. And that is where the block idea comes from. Like, how can we do one apartment at a time? How can we slowly get there? Yeah. Macon. Yeah, we did one where it was a 2-family, and one of the units had been previously renovated, and it was not worth like taking that apart. And so we just made the upper unit passive house, which is sort of like a little passive house within a bigger building. We almost got a project that didn't happen. That was like a relatively tall townhouse in Manhattan that was like 6 families, and the top unit wanted to be passive house. That would have been awesome to try out. So yeah, I think that it needs to go there, right? So that it's so much work to do a whole building. So doing it a little more piecemeal would be amazing. Yeah.
I love seeing the pictures of all of the old wood and the doors, the pocket doors that you discovered. And I'm just curious if there's anything really cool that you've discovered about taking apart these old homes and we're able to still put it back in.
I mean, so many things. It's harder to put back plaster, but anything that's wood is really easy to carefully take out. We did once find some math homework tucked behind a fireplace that looked really old and had a big F on it. Yeah, you find all sorts of cool things when you take old buildings apart. We didn't return that, but we kept it. A kid hid it well.
I just want to say, I love the moment that you guys did in the beginning of the picture. It was so beautiful. And I know it has nothing to do with the passive house, but I was just admiring all the molding on the walls, the bottom, the ceiling. But I wanted to say that you guys' process is on point. The process that you detail out, I really loved it. You said you're still working on it, but it looked like you really got it down pat. The process from designer to the architect to the carpenter, and really like scanning the building
Mhm.
and having surgical to rebuild. It's really it's awesome to me. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just going off of that, I'm a little like interested in like the actual like team and how they all like interact. Like, are you more of a designer? Or are you kind of involved in the actual disassembly parts, and how does that all work like under one roof in-house?
Yeah, so our team is currently 16 people. 8 of them are carpenters by trade, and 8 of them are designers or architects. So it feels really nicely balanced. We have a studio in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That studio is split between office space and shop. And so the shop is used as storage space where we retrofit old lumber elements that are going back into our houses. Yes.
This is a great process. It's great that you're doing this in New York, with all these old buildings. I wonder how it might translate up here on a rural environment where the old buildings are like old farmhouses. And maybe they've been added on to over time, but they're very different buildings you're working.
Yeah, it's interesting, we were driving all day today and, we did pass a bunch of like just falling glass. With raining is just a whole different beast, right? It's really wants to be constantly maintained. I would say that the part that does translate though is that the materials, there's still value in a building, even when it's completely no longer salvageable. I would say still board the wood and see what else can be made from that. Even if it's entirely new, I think there's something about material circularity that is relevant here too.
The same concept of building, interior wall and fitting walls, you can do that on all 4 walls, not just the front and back. So we've done that on a lot of projects where we build that interior wall.
Right, and there's a lot more modular, like prefab house systems for entirely built. So you sort of already get a large house, yeah.
I was just wondering about heating systems that put in these passive houses. Are you?
So they are all air-based pumps. And usually one small unit can power 2 floors of a passive house. Usually there's 3. So the system is like a lot smaller. I would love to do radiant heat, right? But it's what's really difficult with the AC roads that New York City has to invest in a radiant system and then still need air conditioning. I will say that for a really, really sort of experimental client, I think there is a world in which you could shade a passive house, have a dehumidification system, because that needs to be uncomfortable, particularly in these streets. But if you shade the passive house, if you're really careful about the heat not coming in, and you're not going to use the dehumidification, I would argue, in AC might not necessary, but it takes somebody to try that out. Great.
I guess I'm more like the products that you use. I'm like familiar with Timber HP, but like as far as windows go, are there like some top brands that you guys go to? Or are they mostly fixed? Are you able to do optical windows?
No, they're all optical, but they tilt and turn, so they open like stores or like they tilt in, which means they usually seal tightly against the frames. I really want there to be more locally made high performance windows.
They were live windows before.
Yes,
Have
yeah,
we ever used them?
we have not, but we might be about to. But they're also not actually made in the US.
Oh, really? I thought it was Jersey.
I know that they have a,
But I think the thing with them is they're mainly PVC and not
Yeah.
wood. Hard to find a good wood. I mean, Zola is one that we use a lot. Use macro when we use Optiwood a lot.
a lot of these good wood windows are still coming out of Eastern Europe and Austria. Which I'm curious how tariffs will impact that as well. There's one sole woodworker in the Navy Yard making high performance wood windows. Trying to get it to scale up a little because. Yeah.
Did you have to fight like landmark stuff or historic preservation people to get those windows?
No, they're pretty open to them as long as they're sort of look historic from the outside, so they have that double top window look. But then on the inside, only one of those is optical. The thing that we did have to go all the way to commissioner level 2 is the exterior shading. But got that approved.
It was the first time that that's been approved in New York City too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that was a roller shade.
So really interested in the block concept. I think that's a great direction to go. But as you do move forward in the direction that you have right now, are you more interested in doing full guts somewhere in the middle, cervical, like you have this gradient, and you showed us a showcase, you know, one of each or so, but is there something that you like more than another, or something that you find that your team works better doing more than another?
Yes, I think if you ask our carpenters, they all want. There's just, you know. If you can level the flooring, the work with the doors and the trim and all of that is easier down the line. If you have a maybe graded building, like the baseboard. It sucks, but I still maintain that there's something about. Some people just cannot afford. I mean, that's one. And so we have to work with the budget that's available, and the building has it is, and it's. Sometimes it's more labor intensive. But I think in a world in the future where there is a carbon tax. And you are charged for what goes to landfill, I think there's a even bigger argument to be made that, yes, it's more tricky. But I think it's still worth it. To do a surgical renovation under certain circumstances. And I think there are a couple carpenters on our team who are like, yes, and then a couple carpenters who are like, no, absolutely not. So I don't know.
Maybe you ask the clients, like J328 and Q142, those are the same size building. That was underwent different, but the budgets were drastically different.
Yeah, so the budgets were. The budgets alone sort of speak volumes in terms of what's saving. But in terms, interestingly, like, they took the same length of time. Interesting. Right?
Yeah. Station.
It's more finicky and you're protecting things and working around things and, it's not as clear of a slate to work in.
Surgical one was 40% less than the cut. With that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff that's retrofitting, obviously. But do you like have like a team of consultants that you need to go out to, like engineers and stuff, or?
We work with a structural engineer and with mechanical, electrical, nuclear engineer. But all of the passive house, we do in-house.
There were a couple of acronyms that I'm not familiar with. I think you said yards. So
ERV, energy recovery ventilator. So because the passive house is so airtight. You don't get air infiltration through the hallway, leaky windows, leaky doors. So you need a dedicated system that brings fresh air through the house. And that is actually one of the reasons that passive house feels so amazing, is that you have constantly filtered air that's flowing through it. Because it is so tight otherwise. You're eliminating all drafts of all sorts. But it essentially heat exchanges the air, so it's a very low energy, because the cold air and warm air mix, so you don't have a lot of heat loss.
What are those funny pictures that you have of the building you take to right away? It was the really slide.
Oh, that's a
Funny one.
point cloud scan.
Point cloud?
Yeah.
What is that?
So, it's essentially a LiDAR scan. It's a camera that takes, sort of dots. Yeah, makes a three-dimensional image of the building, spatial, and then we can import that into the computer and build our model from it. And so we can see deviations in the floor, we can see thicknesses of the roof, we can understand a lot about it from that scan. Gives a lot better information than sort of hand measuring it. Yeah.
Just thinking about, you said 12 inches of insulation are necessary for the front and the back.
I mean, it's more like 8 in board of the masonry wall. So you have a relatively big windowsill. Cats and kids love it.
Do people usually love it? I mean, I live in Philly, but there are a lot of like renovated Trinities. People are usually, everybody wants to go in and turn out whatever drywall's in there, and then the brick basically. Like, do you find resistance with getting insulation in?
I think you would find resistance if you were in a narrow townhouse, but like usually the 8 inches you're losing at the back and the front is so worth the loss, the gain that you get in terms of quality of life and energy savings. We have these. Yes, that's what I think.
I want to ask about the ERV system. So, do you look at ERV systems forward, you have to have ventilation. going through, you mentioned something about like more localized.
Oh, yeah, the cleans, what are those called? They're called lunos. These lunos makes them. They essentially they work in tandem. So when one holds, the other one pushes, like from front to back of house. Okay. You usually have one in every room and they're synced up. So instead of having one localized unit that's like then piped to all the rooms, you have these little through wall that are connected to one another.
And they're called mostly stuff.
One of the brands that makes them is called Lunos.
Zender makes one too.
Vendor makes one too. Do they have a name? Rural ERV.
You know, okay, there's not a lot of tiny houses, we've done a lot of friends. Kind of noisy,
Yeah, they're kind of nice.
or they, that's what they, that's a little bit of better. Because it's not like a background noise, where it's constant, it's they're turning on and off every 30 seconds. It's just, you know, it's you turn it, no face. But you try to make it happen, nothing nice.
Yeah, we used Zender on that project.
John from never complained.
Never, I didn't know.
Is everyone gonna-
Yeah, I don't think I've actually used the Windows. No, it's the more popular version.
Yes.
Did you say what year when they did your house?
Yeah, it was started in 2016. And finished 2017. I mean, really pretty. Yeah.
Since then, and since starting right after, is there anything that you would go back and change our town house during the last 10 years and biggest standard your house change or that you do? No?
Well, we recently had our heat pump unit fail. Which is really interesting, right? Because past you talk about investing in the envelope so that the systems that have the shorter lifespan are less important. And we haven't had heat in our house because we have fixed that unit and it's been totally fine. So that's awesome. I think with the understanding that those units fail first, I would design them in a demountable box, like for maximum maintenance and for maximum access. Yeah.
Do you find there's constantly new, in this whole world of passive housing, really strong building science, do you find there's always new products or do you have reliable things that you know about? I feel like it's just such a newer concept that how do you know these things going to last 50 years in like, just curious your experience.
I think the products don't change that much. I think the thing that's changing more frequently is like the electronics and the heating and cooling system. So the things that you're investing in, the windows have a 150-year lifespan, ideally, right? So you're investing in the things that will really last a long time and minimizing the things that are constantly changing. And so that's also why they say lowest cost of maintenance, because yes, it's more money upfront. Yes, it's more labor, but over time, because you're not needing to redo that so much, do it at all, your ownership cost is low. Thank you. Yeah.
Question from online. Have you ever placed a CERV or a Minotaur in a project? And I'm hoping you know what these things are.
No, I would like to know.
Yeah, so the heat is like combining with your ERV, so you're delivering heat through
They were
the magic box, the European.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
Well, we can wrap up the official part of the evening and continue to chat if we would like. Thank you.